Chapter 5. It was several hours after midnight when Philip emerged from the large house at the end of the village. He moved furtively, staying in the shadows cast by the houses. In his right hand he carried a large white canvas sack. Gilan watched from his vantage point in a side alley as the seneschal went past him, barely 3 meters away. Philip never noticed him, but he was close enough for Gilan to hear the unmistakable chink as Philip swapped the sack to his other hand. Money, he thought, and quite a lot of it. As the seneschal moved away, Gilan ran lightly to the back of the alley. Staying parallel to the village high road, he continued to move at a run, his feet making barely any sound on the soft earth. By the time he reached the end of the village, he had already overtaken Philip and was now some 10 meters ahead of him. Philip was walking slowly, head down, burdened by the heavy sack. He was taking no interest in his surroundings. At this time of night, he expected to see nobody, and be seen by nobody. Nonetheless, Gilan branched off at an angle and found the cover of the trees. He continued to run, staying parallel to the high road, heading back to the castle and moving further and further ahead of the plodding figure behind him. After sunset, the outer guard post on the isthmus wasn't manned. The guards withdrew inside the castle and the heavy portcullis was lowered to bar entry. But there were still sentries on the battlements and the road across the isthmus was in plain view. However, when Gilan had followed Philip from the castle earlier that evening, he had watched the seneschal climb awkwardly down the rubble-strewn slope beside the road for several meters, where a rough and almost indiscernible track ran through the tumbled rocks. Here he was hidden from the sight of the castle sentries. Gilan moved along the track now until he was only a few meters from the towering castle walls. Then he slipped quickly back up to level ground. Pressing himself against the rough stone, he moved to the left, rounding one of the corner towers. A few meters on, he came to the small wicket gate Philip had used to leave the castle. "There's always a secret way in and out," Gilan had mused, when he had seen the seneschal unlock the gate earlier in the evening. This was the reason for his running ahead of Philip. When the other man re-entered the castle, he would be sure to lock the gate. Gilan pushed it shut behind him and moved stealthily to the keep tower. Once inside, he concealed himself behind a high-backed chair, where he had a view of Philip's office and the massive door to the strong room where the tax money was kept secure. He'd been in place for several minutes when the outer door creaked open and Philip slid round it to enter the keep. He glanced around, making sure there was nobody watching, then hurried to the strong room door. Again, Gilan heard the chink of coins as he set the white sack down and fumbled with a keyring to unlock the strong room. Several minutes later, he emerged and busied himself with the multiple locks on the strong room door. He tested the door to make sure it was secure. Then, with a weary sigh, he made his way to his office and went inside. Gilan knew that Philip's private quarters were located behind the office. He also noticed that, when the seneschal had emerged from the strong room, he wasn't carrying the sack of money. "Fascinating," Gilan said to himself. "It's a big risk," Baron Douglas said, frowning, as Gilan laid out the first part of his plan. "You plan to send the tax money in one small cart with no escort? I don't like it." "It's not exactly unescorted," Gilan said. "After all, I'll be travelling in the cart." Baron Douglas looked unconvinced. Ranger or not, one man would make little difference if Foldar's band decided to attack. "The point is," Gilan continued, "Foldar will think the tax money is in the usual convoy. We'll organise things so it leaves 10 minutes after the small cart, with the usual escort." Baron Douglas leaned back in his chair, shaking his head doubtfully.
If Foldar does decide to steal the tax money, he said, he'll be watching the castle. And he'll see the small cart leave with you aboard it a few minutes before the large wagon and its escort. He'll know you wouldn't let the money out of your sight, and he'll smell a rat. He'll see through your plan. He's no fool, you know.
I'm banking on it, Gilan smiled, because I'm planning a double bluff. The money will actually be where it's supposed to be, in the large wagon with the escort. So while Foldar's busy attacking the small wagon and giving me a chance to capture him, the real tax wagon will be miles away and safe. For a moment, Douglas was speechless. His lips moved wordlessly as he pieced together the convoluted working of Gilan's mind.
So the large wagon, which is supposed to be a decoy, will actually have the money on board all the time, while the small wagon with you in it will be the decoy.
That's right, Gilan said cheerfully. Sometimes I'm so devious I confuse myself.
I wouldn't like to be in your shoes when Foldar catches up with you and realizes you've tricked him,
Douglas said. That's part of the plan. I want him to catch up with me. It'll save me tracking him down. Douglas shook his head at the words.
Better you than me. I wouldn't care to face him when he's angry. Those eyes of his are enough to send shivers down your spine. They're cold and lifeless, like a snake's.
I've killed a few snakes in my time, Gilan said, dropping his insouciant manner. Douglas rubbed his chin nervously as he saw the sudden steel in the young ranger's eyes. He let his own gaze slide away and quickly changed the subject.
Of course, the men who load the wagons will know which one has the money inside. We'll have to make sure they don't talk.
Keep them locked up for a day, Gilan said, and Douglas's brows came together in a frown.
Isn't that a little drastic? He said.
Gilan shrugged the protest aside. You don't have to chain them up in a dungeon. Just keep them incommunicado for a day. We can't risk the word of the double bluff getting to Foldar. And we know there's an informer somewhere in the castle. This way, you and I will be the only ones who know the real story.
And Philip, of course, Douglas said. He has to count the money and certify the tax forms. Do you want me to lock him up too?
Gilan hesitated for just a moment, then said easily, No, I'm sure we can trust Philip. How many men in your troop? Gilan asked the red-bearded ploughman. His name was Bran Richards, and he was the commander of the local troop of archers. Every fief in the kingdom was charged with maintaining a ready force of archers. The men trained year-round, in addition to their normal tasks of ploughing, harvesting, or milling. In the event of a war, they could be called up into the royal army and be ready to fight immediately. 15, the man replied. It should be 18, but we lost 3 men in the war. We'll have to recruit 3 new men and start training them soon. Well, 6 should be enough for my purposes. Pick your 6 best archers and wait for me the day after tomorrow, 3 kilometers past the point where the coast road and the high road diverge. There's a small copse of trees there where you can hide. Stay out of sight. In fact, it might be best if you moved into position before first light. Bran nodded. Whatever you say. A new thought struck Gilan. One thing, he said. Tell your men this is just a routine field exercise. Don't mention that I'm involved, all right? In fact, don't mention it to anybody. Bran nodded his understanding. He gestured to the flagon on the table between them. They were sitting in the comfortable parlour of his home. More cider? He offered, but Gilan shook his head. I need to keep a clear head, he said. I've got a lot of arrangements to make.